What you just heard wasn't Kate Bush. It was me. My name's Torvik, and here's how I recreated Running Up That Hill from scratch. Running Up That Hill was released in 1985, written, produced, and performed by Kate Bush herself. It became an instant UK hit, reaching number 3 on the charts. Fast forward almost 4 decades later, and it blows up again, this time thanks to a little Netflix show called Stranger Things. The resurgence was wild. It hit number 1 in the UK, cracked the top 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 for the first time ever, and now it sits at over 1.3 billion streams on Spotify alone. As a big fan of this era of music and this song itself, I set out to recreate the foundational elements of this song by ear from scratch. Let's get into it. The first thing I want to break down is drums. It's such a foundational aspect of the rhythm section of this song. To me, it is the first kind of staple characteristic when you hear this song kick in. My understanding of the percussion in the song is that there's 2 layers, maybe more, but 2 layers of percussion in the song. One, of course, being the legendary Linn-Drum LM1. The second being just a vintage drum set from the late 70s or 80s that's pretty dead, maybe with like a gated reverb on it, which is what we're going to emulate here as well. Really quickly before I layer these drums, I am using a VST here in Pro Tools, which means I need to use a wrapper plugin. I'm not sponsored in any way by anything that you are going to see today, but I do use the Meta plugin synth wrapper in order to be able to activate these VSTs within Pro Tools. The plugin that I'm using for the Linn-Drum LM1 is the ALD2 from Audio Lounge. I love this plugin. It's an amazing, accurate recreation of the original Linn-Drum, sampled from the very device itself, and the layout, as you can see, is very, very similar, if not nearly identical to the original. As you can hear in the original, this pattern is very much so kick, tom, and snare driven. I've just tried to recreate the pattern as closely as I could to the original, but there's a couple little details here. One being the side stick and the panning on the tom. So you'll hear in the original, at least when I hear it, this is something that I was able to perceive, and I'm hoping it's close to the original. You hear this kind of click on the right side, which my assumption is the highest cross tick, and then you get a hard pan on the left side of a tom. So you get this kind of and it's this little bit of intentional panning on the Linn-Drum itself that I feel like gives this kit this kind of openness and this movement. So what I did was as simple as this. I just took that middle tom and detuned it to match the low tom, so it pretty much sounded tonally the same when I was going between the low and the middle tom, and then I just panned the middle tom over all the way to the left. And on the cross stick, you can see here, I just panned it all the way to the right, and I only trigger on that one, and you can kind of hear what that sounds like here. As far as the processing that I have on the LM1, it's very simple. I have an 1176 compressor to tighten things up, make it a little bit sharper. I have some tape saturation by Verve from Universal Audio, and then I have a gated reverb on there as well, just to give it that really distinct 80 sound. Like I said, when researching the song, I did hear that they used a secondary drum set on here, and that's pretty obvious when you actually hear the build out of the percussion in the song. So the best way that I could emulate that was just use a vintage drum sound. In this case, I'm going to use the drum set from Labs by Spitfire Audio. I'm using the Animal kit. This is kind of a vintage drum set. I essentially have it doing the exact same supportive pattern as the LM1 to just give it a little bit of meat beneath the Linn-Drum itself, and this is how it sounds. And here's how both of those sound together. Now, obviously, the nuances of every single instrument that Kate Bush used in this song, I don't have access to or couldn't find for whatever reason. But one of the things that I do know is she very often used the Yamaha CS80, another legendary, like, $80,000 synth nowadays. I don't know if it was on this song. I kind of expect that it was used in some way. I used the CS80, of course in plugin form in my case, to recreate the pad underneath this entire track. This whole song is kind of glued together by this ethereal, open, very like slow attack pad that just kind of modulates in the background of the track itself. All right, the way that I built this out is fairly simple. This is the Arturia CS80V. This is their emulation of the Yamaha CS80. So using the CS80 pad as kind of the foundation, I knew that this just needed to be very granular, very vintage, very noisy, and it also needed to move very, very slowly. So one of the things that I have on here is I do have a decent amount of pulse width modulation. You can get that kind of granular open sound and some of that rubbing that happens with that modulation. As you can see over here, I have the attack on both VSFs completely maxed out. Nothing is really sharp or transient or triggered. It feels very slow. Honestly, one of the most important aspects of this is the noise. I've cranked the noise on both of these filters to the max. And as far as processing this, I have a little bit of EQ on there. I'm just high passing to take out some of the low end mud and let this kind of live in its own space in the mix. But really the only other processing that I have on here, which is a big part of the processing, honestly, is this Valhalla super massive reverb on here. This just floods the signal. It takes all of that granular texture, all of that movement from the pulse width, all of that modulation that we have, and just kind of breaks it up and scatters it eternally. But for me, this does model pretty closely the reflections and movement and openness that you hear in the intro and throughout the song. And here's how it sounds on its own. All right, next is really the identity of this song. It is a Fairlight CMI sampler. Kate Bush was kind of renowned for using this sampler, one of probably the first producers and artists to popularize this sampler. Also really quick, if you like content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does help with the YouTube algorithm and with pushing this video out to more creatives and producers and fans of this music that would like to see what we're doing here. All right, so in my loose research and trying to build out these sounds, I found that the original sample that was used in Kate Bush's record was the Cello 2 in the Fairlight CMI, the Cello 2 sample on one of the original cartridges. So that is what I am actually using. All right, so digging a little deeper into the screen of the CMI sampler. This is the Cello 2 sample, completely dry, sounds like this. I also want to say really quickly too that I'm not going to dig too much in like the mixing of this song. I know there's some more layering I can do. I know there's some like EQ and compression stuff that I could kind of build out a little bit more that aren't going to maybe sound exactly like the original. I just kind of want to get, I guess, the soul of the song through some of the gear they might have used or emulations that they might have used, but this is not going to be like a perfectly remixed version of the song, so please keep that in mind. But as far as building out the sound design of the cello sample here, there's only one detail that I tried to really morph and manipulate here in the CMI plugin, and that was assigning an envelope filter to the pitch of the sample itself. So whenever I hit a key on here, and you'll see right here on the screen, you can see there's a very, very small bend in the cello sample, and I'm using this envelope right here, this small little movement right here, in order to go from about 50 cents down, so like half a semitone, 50 cents down up to the full note of the cello sample right here, utilizing this envelope. Otherwise, it's kind of rigid and sterile. It just feels really strict. This is kind of what I was able to figure out as far as like getting that almost portamento style bend without it being just a monophonic portamento bend. You can hear this little, you get that little wah, wah, the little movement right before. That is largely due to that envelope triggering about half a semitone bend up into the original sample. But that little bend right there, to me, does match some of the soul and character of the original song. As far as processing goes on the Fairlight CMI, it's pretty simple once again, but there are some kind of staple effects on here that you'll hear in a second. First being an LA2A that I'm using to kind of glue everything together, tighten it up a bit and push it forward. I'm also saturating with this ADT right here. I'm using this one as a saturator to create some a little bit of tension, but I'm also using it as kind of stereo width to kind of open it up a bit more as well. And then the only other three things that I have on here would be a little bit of plate reverb. I'm keeping that really simple. And then I also have this Studio D chorus. I'm using number 3. This is an emulation of the Roland Studio D, which is a fantastic piece of gear. I got to use one once. It is pretty fabulous sounding, especially the original analog unit. Brilliant. And then the last thing, of course, which is also kind of a staple sound of this record, is this slap delay. I'm keeping it simple. I'm just using H delay by Waves. Have it a bit more lo-fi on there. It's got more of kind of an analog feel, but this sound on its own sounds like this. Underneath this, I believe, is actually the same sample, the Cello 2, that kind of builds out the chord, or it might be like a fifth and maybe another triad in there that is kind of underneath this lead melody with the cello too. It's a little bit simpler, a little bit more filtered out, and this kind of sits underneath some of the song structure here, and at least as far as I'm hearing, carries the chords underneath that lead melody, and as well as having the CS80 as a pad kind of gluing everything together. Sounds like this. All right, the last thing that I did to make this feel as authentic and real as possible, instead of using my own voice to try to recreate this, which just thank God we didn't do that. Nobody wants that. But I found Kate Bush a cappella to drop into this song. This is what it sounds like.
It doesn't hurt me, yeah. Do you wanna feel how it feels?
Such a unique, fantastic voice. Those are all of the elements that I used to simply recreate the foundational elements of Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush. Of course, like I said, there's many things that I could do to hone this and tighten it up, especially on the mixing side to make it maybe a little bit more identical to the original. But this is how everything sounds together from the beginning. Please let me know in the comments if you like what you hear. Let's get into it. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and thanks to Kate Bush for making such an incredible, timeless piece of art. If you like this breakdown, it would mean so much to me if you would like, subscribe, and maybe comment a part of the production that was the most surprising to you. Also, let me know what track I should recreate next. We're just getting started. Peace.